We wanted more light in the house. That's how it started. The kitchen always felt too dim. Something about the cabinets, they were the kind of rich, cherrywood tone that looked elegant in photos but sucked the warmth out of mornings. No matter how sunny it was outside, the room always looked like it had just missed something, like the day had already moved on without us. Lena said it made her feel tired just standing in there. She was always the one to notice those things. The angles, the mood of a room. I used to think it was a gift. We'd been talking about a remodel for years, and when we finally pulled the trigger last fall, it felt like a symbolic fix. Not just for the room, but for us. Our schedules had become mismatched. Conversations clipped. Nights longer and quieter than they used to be. We told ourselves it was work. Stress. The economy. Everyone was feeling it. This would be something fresh. Something together. But from the beginning, it didn't quite land that way. We hired a local contractor named Mason. Younger than I expected. Maybe late 20s, if that. He came recommended by a friend of Lena's coworker. Quiet guy, steady hands, quick smile. He wore white t-shirts that somehow stayed clean even when he was sanding cabinets. His laugh was soft and self-deprecating, the kind that doesn't push its way into a room but waits to be noticed. I was in the office most days when he arrived, working remotely from the converted guest room upstairs. Lena, who had more flexibility in her hours, handled the project in person. She said it didn't make sense for both of us to hover. So she stayed with Mason during the day, picked out paint samples, talked layout, made coffee, that sort of thing. At first, I liked hearing her voice drift through the vents when she laughed at something he said. It had been a while since she laughed easily. I told myself it was the project, the change, new energy in the house. That's what she needed. That's what we needed. The dust got worse before it got better. By the third week, there was a fine film on everything: floors, picture frames, even the inside of closed drawers. I vacuumed constantly. Lena didn't seem to mind. She said it was part of the process. It's temporary, she told me, running her finger across the windowsill. Transformation always looks like a mess at first. I remember that line because it didn't sound like her. Lena wasn't one for metaphors. She was literal, precise. But something about the way she said it, slow and smiling, made me pause. Still, I didn't think much of it then. That week, she started dressing a little differently. Nothing dramatic. Just not her usual at-home attire. A button-down blouse instead of one of my old college sweatshirts. Jeans that looked too stiff for painting walls. Once, I came down for water and saw her in a white sundress. The hem was caught slightly in the vent breeze, and for a split second, I had the strange feeling I wasn't supposed to be seeing her. Like I'd walked in on something mid-scene. She noticed me and smiled. "You're never downstairs during the day anymore," she said. "You live in that office." I smiled back and said something about deadlines. She nodded, but I caught her eyes flick to her phone on the counter. Just for a second. Then she picked up a box cutter and turned back to the cabinetry Mason had left out for her to approve. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through backsplash options while she showered. Our dog, Felix, jumped up and nestled against her pillow, which was weird because he never did that when she was home. Only when she was away. When she came back into the room wrapped in a towel, I asked her if she liked the black herringbone tile I'd bookmarked. She barely looked at it. "Too dramatic," she said. "I think we need something softer." I closed the laptop. She climbed into bed and curled onto her side facing the wall. That was the first night I noticed her phone wasn't plugged in on the nightstand. 2 days later, I was eating lunch at my desk when I heard a knock downstairs. Not Mason, he had a key and usually just let himself in. I peeked out the window. It was him, standing on the porch holding something in his hands. Lena answered the door. She smiled wide and opened it with both arms, like she'd been waiting all morning. "I thought you had a spare," she said. Her voice was lighter than usual. "Still figured you'd want this back," he replied. I didn't go down to ask what it was. I couldn't explain why I didn't. just something in the way their voices sounded. How he said this, like it was more than an object. That afternoon, the house smelled different. Not like paint or would stain. Something floral. Subtle. I followed the scent to the bathroom where a fresh bar of soap sat in the dish, unopened, but faintly fragrant. The wrapper said lavender and bergamot. Lena always used unscented. That night, she was humming. I hadn't heard her hum in months. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels staged. That's how the house felt by week 4 of the renovation. Like a set piece after the actors stepped away, but the lights were still on, waiting for the scene to continue. Every cabinet door was off its hinges. Half the appliances were pushed into the living room, covered with sheets. The island was just a skeleton of beams. But the quiet was curated. A stillness that hummed under the drywall dust, like something had happened in the room, but left no proof. That was the week I started checking things. Not out of paranoia, at least not at first. I was looking for a receipt I thought I'd left on the kitchen counter. A plumbing fixture quote I needed to send to our accountant. But when I moved Lena's stack of folded cloth napkins, why they were out, I didn't know. I found her phone underneath. Unlocked. There were no texts from Mason. Nothing in her call history either. In fact, the entire messaging app looked scrubbed, as if she'd reset the whole thing. But in her notes app, maybe by accident, maybe not, there was an open draft titled Cabinet Handles. The body was blank. Just the title. I didn't touch it. Didn't close it. I set the phone back exactly as I found it, napkins and all. The next morning, she asked if I wanted to take a day off to go tile shopping with her. She said it suddenly, while making coffee. Her voice casual, but her back was too straight. It struck me then how rarely we stood in the kitchen at the same time anymore. Even with the remodel, we were always moving around each other like guests in a space that wasn't ours yet. Can't, I said. Wednesdays full of client calls. She didn't respond, just nodded and stirred her coffee. But I watched her reflection in the microwave door as she took a sip. She wasn't disappointed. She was relieved. Later that day, I overheard her laugh again. Not the soft chuckle I used to love. This one was breathy, drawn out. It sounded rehearsed. I stood just outside the office, door cracked. Mason was showing her something about grout lines, crouched beside her near the tile samples. She was kneeling too, head tilted, fingers brushing the edge of a ceramic piece. "It's beautiful," she said, barely above a whisper. "The tile?" he asked. She didn't answer. That night, I made dinner, something simple. Pan-seared salmon and garlic rice. She ate slowly, said thank you, complimented the flavors. Her plate was almost empty when I noticed the ring. It wasn't on her finger. She used to take it off sometimes to clean or garden. But lately, it was more often than not. She said it got caught on things. That it didn't fit right anymore. "It still fits you fine," I said, nodding at her bare hand. She looked down like she hadn't noticed. "Oh, I forgot to put it back on." I nodded. "You forget a lot these days." She didn't reply, just picked up her wine glass and stared into it like something was supposed to be written in the sediment. That weekend, I took Felix for a long walk through the neighborhood. He was slower now, 10 years old and starting to limp on cold mornings. But he still had that determined pull on the leash whenever we passed the park. On the way back, I ran into one of our neighbors, Gail. She lived 2 doors down and had known Lena since before we were married. "How's the renovation coming?" she asked. "Loud," I said. "Dusty." Gail smiled. "Lena seems to be loving it. She and that young contractor are always out there talking in the driveway when I come back from errands. She told me he gave her a bracelet for helping pick materials." I froze. "Bracelet? Oh, maybe I heard that wrong," she said quickly. "I just saw her wearing something new. Thought it was cute." Lena didn't wear much jewelry. She had a pair of silver earrings from her mother and the ring I gave her. That was it. She used to say anything more felt like playing dress up. When I got home, I didn't ask her about the bracelet. Instead, I went into the kitchen and opened the drawer by the sink, her unofficial junk drawer. Old receipts, extra batteries, a few dried-up pens. Buried underneath a roll of painter's tape, I found a thin velvet box. Inside was a bracelet. Not expensive, not flashy. A braided leather band with a tiny brass clasp. Masculine, almost. But it was engraved. Thank you for holding my hand when the dust was unbearable. My throat tightened. My chest didn't explode. It caved in. The sentence didn't sound like Lena. It sounded about Lena. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she leaned toward Mason when she asked about grout colors. The way she paused before opening the front door in the mornings. How she started taking her coffee into the garage when he arrived. The phone with no messages. The lavender soap. She didn't need to text him. He was already in the house. That night, I lay awake and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, one arm curled beneath her head, hair spread out across the pillow. And I hated that part of me still wanted to reach for her. Still remembered the way she used to tuck her feet against mine when the nights got cold. But this wasn't that woman anymore. This wasn't us anymore. It had started with the kitchen, with wanting more light. And now the walls were coming down, but not the ones we'd hired someone to demolish. Those ones she'd already stripped bare. The next morning, I didn't mention the bracelet. I didn't mention the drawer, or the engraving, or the silence in her phone. I didn't say anything at all. Instead, I watched her. Watched the way she tied her hair up when she thought no one was looking. The way she kept glancing at the clock as Mason's arrival time neared. How her whole posture changed when she heard his truck in the driveway, like she was bracing for impact, but in reverse, like she was relieved the waiting was over. I waited until she left the room, then went to the window and watched them through the slats of the blinds. He handed her a box. Nothing big. Something small enough to be passed with one hand. She smiled, then laughed, then reached out and touched his shoulder, not quite affectionately, not quite casually. Somewhere in between. The kind of touch that only looks innocent until you've seen the way she avoids touching you. When I asked that night how the day went, she said the backsplash finally got sorted out. That Mason had found a better adhesive. That the paint on the ceiling might need a second coat. She didn't mention the box. She didn't mention anything else. It struck me then, not just what she was hiding, but how well she hid. Not clumsy or anxious. Not guilty. Seamless. Controlled. That was almost worse than being caught red-handed. She didn't even seem torn. 2 days later, I checked the trash bin in the garage while taking out the recycling. Buried beneath a layer of packaging and tile shards, I found it, the box from that morning. Small. Square. Jewelry-shaped. No receipt. No tag. The inside was still warm from the heat of the house. Empty. That same night, I started tracking the renovation costs again. We had a spreadsheet we shared on Google Drive. Joint access. One of those practical marriage things that always felt overly technical for something as intimate as home. But I noticed something strange. The last few receipts, paint orders, tool rentals, weren't from our usual supplier. In fact, they weren't addressed to our house. They were addressed to an apartment 2 towns over. An address I didn't recognize. I clicked on it. The listing was still active. A small second-story walk-up with a view of a park. Unfurnished. Available for short-term rental. The kind of place you'd use if you didn't want to be seen. If you wanted a space that wasn't tied to your name. I closed the tab and walked into the bedroom. Lena was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing lotion into her hands. Her fingers smelled like rosemary and mint. The new kind she'd bought last month, the one she said felt grown up. I sat down beside her. Quiet. Waiting. You okay? She asked after a long minute. Yeah, I said. Just tired. She nodded, but didn't look at me. Didn't press. Her eyes stayed fixed on her hands, rubbing the same spot over and over again until the skin turned red. Later that night, I checked the location history on her phone while she slept. She hadn't changed her iCloud password. The address was there. Twice. Once last week. Once the week before. Mid-afternoon. Right when she told me she was at the design center picking up paint swatches. She was never at the design center. She was at the apartment. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, my thoughts pacing the length of the bed while Felix snored softly on the floor. I wasn't angry yet. That surprised me. I was somewhere colder than anger. Somewhere still. The next day, I called in sick to work. She was surprised when I came down to the kitchen in jeans instead of slacks. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Took a personal day." She hesitated. "You never do that." "I know. Just needed a break." Mason arrived 10 minutes later. He greeted her like usual, warm, easy, just shy of flirtation. Then he saw me. His smile froze for a second. Just a flicker. "Morning," he said. I nodded. I figured I'd see how the backsplash is coming along. He glanced at Lena. She glanced at me. Then she smiled. "Too wide." "Great. We're sealing the grout today." I stood in the kitchen while he worked. Pretended to watch. Asked questions. Noticed how Lena stayed farther away when I was near. How she offered him water but didn't ask if I wanted any. They didn't touch. Not once. But the distance between them felt full. When I stepped outside to take a fake phone call, I doubled back around the side of the house and stood under the open kitchen window. I heard everything. "I didn't know he'd be home today," she said, voice low but sharp. "I know," Mason replied. "It's fine. Just different. I don't like sneaking around." "Then don't," he said. There was a long pause. Footsteps. Maybe they sat down. "I'm trying," she said finally. "You know that." "I know," he said. "But trying's not the same as choosing." Silence. Then, "He's not who I thought he was." I moved away from the window before I could hear more, because I wasn't sure if she meant me or Mason. That evening, I cooked again. Simple pasta. Garlic bread. She didn't eat much. "I'm not really hungry," she said. "Maybe I'm getting sick." I nodded. Said nothing. Watched as she placed her napkin carefully on the table and stood up. She kissed me on the cheek before bed, out of habit, not feeling, and turned off the light. But I stayed in the dark, staring at the ceiling, holding the words she'd said like a splinter in my chest. "He's not who I thought he was." "Neither are you, Lena. Neither are you." I didn't confront her. Not directly. There's a kind of clarity that comes when the mask finally slips. When you stop waiting for an explanation and realize you're not going to get one. Not from her. Not in a way that would make any of it clean. So I started noticing things on purpose. Like how she moved her wedding ring to a small dish on the bathroom shelf, right next to her earrings and that new necklace she never wore for me. Or how Mason had stopped using the front entrance entirely. How he came in through the side door now, the one that opened straight into the garage. Quieter that way. On Thursday, she told me she'd be out late. Something about lighting fixtures. The showroom had a new line, she said, and she wanted to compare finishes in person. But the showroom closed at 6. At 7:15, I drove to the apartment. I didn't know what I expected. Her car? His? A light on in the window. A silhouette I could name? Instead, I saw emptiness. No one came in. No one went out. Just a single blue curtain pulled too tight over one pane, and a porch light that flickered like it wasn't sure it wanted to be on. I stayed 20 minutes, then drove home. When she walked in around 9, I was at the kitchen table, rereading an old invoice. She kissed the top of my head. "Find anything good?" she asked, gesturing to the paper. I smiled, thin and automatic. "Yeah, found a mistake." She didn't ask what it was. She never asks anymore. By Friday, something in her had shifted. I could feel it before she said anything. At breakfast, she made toast for both of us. buttered it just the way I like. She asked about work, mentioned a new lamp for the entryway. She even laughed at one of my old stories, some college tale about the professor who kept mispronouncing Nietzsche and refused to admit it. She hadn't laughed like that in months, maybe longer, but it wasn't warmth I felt. It was calculation. She was softening the edges of something. That afternoon, Mason didn't show up. She didn't say why. She just vacuumed, rearranged a few plants, wiped down the counters twice. At one point, I asked if she wanted help picking a new pendant light for above the island. She looked at me like I'd asked if she believed in ghosts. No, she said quickly. It's fine. I've got it covered. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Her breathing had the even rhythm of someone pretending not to dream. I crept back downstairs and opened her laptop. It wasn't password protected. I think she assumed I'd never look. Maybe she wanted me to. Her email was clean. Too clean. The inbox was full of spam and sale ads, but none of the correspondence I knew she had. No updates from the contractor, no receipts from the rental. Everything scrubbed. Except one. A draft. Unsent. It had no subject line. No recipient. Just one sentence in the body of the message. He still doesn't know, but I think he's starting to watch me. I sat there, staring at those words, and felt something in me tighten. She was writing about me. She was documenting her own guilt like it was a secret memoir. Like she needed to say the truth somewhere, even if she couldn't say it aloud. I closed the laptop without deleting it. Left it exactly how I found it. If she wanted to know I'd seen it, she would. The next morning, she was different again. Quiet. Distracted. She fumbled her coffee cup and dropped her phone twice before 10 a.m. By noon, she came into my office and stood in the doorway. Not inside the room, just near it. I think we should take a break, she said. I looked up. From what? She blinked. From us. From this. My mouth went dry. She kept going. I think we're in different places, and maybe we've been pretending we're not. I wanted to ask who she was pretending with. Me? Him? Herself? But I didn't. Instead, I said, is there someone else? She didn't answer right away. That was the answer. I stared at her, trying to remember how long it had been since I'd really seen her. Not this version. Not the version trying to disappear into the drywall. Just her. Finally, she said, it's not what you think. Which is always what people say when it's exactly what you think. I nodded once. When were you going to tell me? She opened her mouth, closed it again. I don't know. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something that wasn't just pain. I felt clarity. She left 2 days later. No bags. Just a weekend tote and a charger. She said she'd be staying with her sister. I didn't ask which one. I didn't need to. The renovation halted that same day. Mason never came back. No calls. No invoice. No explanation. Just silence. The kitchen sat half-finished. Tiles stacked in boxes. Cabinet doors still missing. The dust lingered in corners like it had decided the house belonged to it now. At night, I stood in the doorway of the empty room and stared at what we'd tried to build. What she'd used to cover the cracks. The new countertops gleamed in the moonlight like something freshly unwrapped, but they already felt old. I reached into the junk drawer and pulled out the bracelet. Turned it over in my hands. Read the engraving again. Thank you for holding my hand when the dust was unbearable. I held it there, fingers wrapped around the clasp, and whispered to no one. You don't hold hands with the person you're planning to leave. The thing about unfinished work is it festers. A wall half-painted. A sentence without a period. A goodbye that doesn't sound like one. It lingers. Infects the air around it. The kitchen stayed exactly as she left it. Like a crime scene sealed off for investigation. Her ceramic mug still sat on the windowsill where she used to drink tea in the mornings. A single tile, white, matte, slightly cracked in one corner, waited on the floor beneath the sink. It never got installed. Neither did she. I didn't call her. Didn't text. I let the silence stretch long enough to become its own presence in the house. I wanted her to feel it through the walls. I wanted him to feel it too. Because this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. This was about the insult of it. The precision. The quiet dismantling of something she swore to preserve. So I finished what she started. I called Mason. Used a burner number. I wasn't sure he'd pick up, but he did. His voice was as steady as ever, but there was a pause before he said, "Hello," like he was bracing for something. I didn't waste time. "You left some of your tools behind," I said. "Thought you'd want them back." A pause. Yeah. I can swing by tomorrow if that works." "Make it tonight," I said. "House is empty. Easier that way." He hesitated. "You sure?" I smiled. "I'm sure." He arrived at 7:42 p.m. I was waiting on the porch with the bracelet in my hand. He parked further down the street. Smart. Maybe he didn't want anyone to know he was back. Or maybe he thought she'd still be here. When he stepped into the house, I could tell something had shifted in him. His eyes darted, looking for her. His mouth opened, then closed. "She's not here," I said. He nodded. I figured. I didn't say anything right away. Just handed him the bracelet. He looked down, confused. "She left it behind," I said. "Seems like the kind of thing you return. Thought maybe you'd want to be the one to do it." He didn't reach for it. Instead, he said, "Look, man, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Classic line. The kind cheaters pass around like breath mints. I didn't move. "You held her hand through the dust." "That's what the engraving says." He blinked. I stepped closer. "Was that before or after she took off her ring?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Good. I didn't want excuses. I wanted truth. "She used our home," I said quietly. "Used the renovation like a costume change. Thought if she knocked down a few walls, she could start over without actually leaving." Still, he said nothing. I stepped back and pointed to the kitchen. "You see this mess? This is what it looks like when someone decides they don't have to clean up after themselves. When they think the next life is waiting for them on the other side of demolition." I looked him straight in the eye. "She'll do it to you too." That got him. His mouth twitched. Maybe he wanted to argue. Maybe he wanted to confess. Instead, he said, "You don't know her." "Don't I?" Because I did. I knew the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was lying. I knew the way her voice softened not out of love, but out of calculation. I knew how she smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. I knew exactly who she was. He left without another word. Didn't take the bracelet. Didn't take the tools. Just got in his truck and drove off, tires skimming the curb on the turn like he wasn't quite in control. I stood in the doorway long after he was gone, the bracelet still in my hand. Cold now. The silence settled back around me. Not empty. Just earned. That night, I went through her emails again. This time, I didn't stop at the draft. I dug. She deleted everything from her inbox, but not from the archive. There were flight confirmations. Receipts for dinners in a town she never told me she'd visited. A digital card from Mason, months before the remodel began. "Can't wait to see the space through your eyes." That's what it said. There were no photos. No explicit confessions. But they didn't need them. The betrayal was in the planning, in the logistics, and how normal it all looked when laid out in subject lines and booking confirmations. She had arranged our unraveling with the same calm precision she used to choose drawer pulls. I forwarded everything to my own address. Then I drafted one final email and sent it to her. Subject, your renovation. Body, you forgot the foundation still belonged to me. She came back the next day, let herself in with the spare key under the flower pot. I heard the door open from the office, the way her footsteps faltered halfway down the hall. She didn't expect it to feel this different. "Hey," she called out, cautious. I didn't answer. I wanted her to find me. When she stepped into the kitchen, she stopped cold. I'd laid out everything on the countertop. The printed emails. The bracelet. The open folder of receipts, flights, wine bars she'd never mentioned. She stood there for a long time before speaking. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. Before or after the backsplash? Her face twisted like she wanted to cry, but couldn't find the tears. That made two of us. You don't understand it. I understand everything, I said. Her hands trembled. She reached for the bracelet but didn't touch it. I never wanted to hurt you. That one made me laugh. Dry. Quiet. Then why did you do it like this? I asked. In the middle of our home. In front of the dog. In front of me. She didn't answer. Just stared at the mess on the counter like it was something she hadn't realized she made. I trusted you, I said. And then, quieter, I built this house around you. She whispered, I didn't know how to leave. So you stayed and dismantled me instead? She left again that night. For good this time, I think. She didn't take much. A bag. Her coat. Not even the mug from the windowsill. I watched her from the upstairs window as she walked to her car. For a second, she looked back. But I didn't wave. Didn't move. She got in and drove off. And I stayed. In the house we started together. Alone now. But still standing. The kitchen is finished now. I did it myself. Not because I wanted to. Not even because I needed to. But because it was the only way to understand what had been taken from me. I taught myself how to hang cabinet doors from YouTube videos. Learned the right rhythm for cutting tile without shattering the edges. My hands blistered. My knees ached from kneeling on plywood too long. But the pain felt honest. Tangible. A currency I could understand. I left one section of wall bare. Just a square behind the fridge. Exposed beams, old wiring, the kind of thing most people would patch without thinking. But I leave it as a reminder of what's underneath. The neighbors ask about her sometimes. Quietly. As if they're afraid the wrong word might knock something over inside me. Is Lena staying with family? Will she be back once the kitchen's done? I shrug. Offer vague answers. Tell them we needed space. Tell them she's finding herself. The truth doesn't live in sentences anymore. It lives in the air between them. Gail, the one who mentioned the bracelet, brought over a casserole last week. Left it on the porch with a note in slanted cursive. You didn't deserve that. No name. No explanation. She was right. I started sleeping in the guest room. Ours still smells like her. Lavender and mint. Faint now, but stubborn. Her ring still sits in the jewelry dish. She never came back for it. Some nights, I take it out. Hold it up to the light. It's scuffed on the inside. From years of being worn, or from how easily it was taken off. I'm not sure which. I never wore one myself. I had a simple band. Yes, but I worked with my hands. Always meant to get it resized so I could wear it without it slipping. Lena said it didn't matter. Now I think it might have. I keep finding things she left behind. Things she didn't think I'd notice, or maybe hoped I would. A folded grocery list in the pocket of her raincoat. A book she was halfway through, spine cracked at chapter 12. An old scarf she used to wear when we walked by the lake in October. Back when we still touched without thinking about it. Each one feels like a message. Each one says, I was here. I thought I'd stay. Sometimes I wonder what she tells people now. Her friends. Her sister. Him. Do they know what she said in the kitchen that day? Do they know how flat her voice sounded when she told me she didn't know how to leave? Do they know she watched the dust settle around us for months and still waited for someone else to make it right? I doubt it. She always knew how to shape a story. That was her real talent. I haven't seen Mason since that night. His truck doesn't drive by anymore. I hear he took a job upstate. Bigger clients. Corporate projects. He won't be installing anyone's backsplash by hand for a while. Maybe that's for the best. He learned something here, too. Something I didn't have to say out loud. He looked into the eyes of the man whose life he'd quietly stepped into and realized the space he thought he'd been invited into was a house still full of ghosts. Let him build new walls somewhere else. These ones remember. The dog took it the hardest. Felix still waits by the door some mornings. He doesn't whine, doesn't bark, just sits there and watches the glass like he's waiting for a figure to appear in it. One who used to hum while she tied her shoes. One who used to scratch behind his ear and call him her little shadow. I kneel beside him sometimes, rub the soft patch behind his neck, and whisper that she's not coming back. He still waits, but less now. He's starting to follow me again. I found the bracelet yesterday, buried in the back of a drawer, underneath the sandpaper and extra screws. I'd forgotten I put it there. For a moment, I almost threw it out. But instead, I walked it out to the shed, took the old sledgehammer, and crushed the clasp until it bent in on itself, metal folding like paper. Then I tossed it in the fire pit and watched it melt into something unrecognizable. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. The new pendant light over the kitchen island throws warm light across the counters now. In the late afternoon, when the sun hits it just right, the whole room glows golden. It's the kind of light Lena always wanted. The kind she said made things feel safe. Funny how it only arrived after she left. Funny how you can live inside the same walls for years and never really see them until they're empty. I still check her Instagram sometimes. She hasn't posted in weeks. The last photo was a close-up of a latte and a book. No caption, no tags, just a corner of a life that isn't mine anymore. I don't like the photo. Don't zoom in or scroll further. I just look at it for a moment. Then I close the app and move on. People think betrayal is loud, that it comes in slammed doors and shouted accusations. But I've learned it's quiet. It's soft hands and small choices. It's forgetting to ask, forgetting to stay. It's dust that settles while you're still trying to breathe. But eventually, you do. Eventually, you stand in your own kitchen, alone with the echo of what didn't last, and realize something. You're still here. And there's light now, even if it doesn't fall the way you expected. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next confession. Until next time, take care and watch who you trust.